Hello and welcome to this week's live event. My name is Ailsa Kepi and you can check out my website at www.pleasureforhealth.com. We're also streaming live today in the free Facebook group for women. It's called Women Healing from Emotional Abuse with Power, Passion, and Pleasure. And that is a free resource for female identified people who would like to join a supportive community to begin your journey of healing, overcome emotional abuse, and have some support to start that. These videos I do live every week for that particular group and for the broader community, as I feel that emotional abuse, as it relates to women, is extremely important topic in our society these days. And I wanted to start off today, we're going to talk about who are your abusers, how does emotional abuse work. So, I just want to start off really by defining abuse, because many people that find my Facebook group or find me online are unaware to the extent at which they're actually being abused. So I wanted to define abuse as any behavior that is designed to control and subjugate another human being. And this can be through the use of fear or humiliation, verbal or physical assaults. Emotional abuse itself is any kind of abuse that is emotional rather than physical. Obviously, physical, sexual, financial, elder abuse, all of these things come into under the term of abuse, and often they're intertwined. So many times you have more than one type of abuse going on at once. But emotional abuse would really be that kind of verbal abuse, constant criticism, things like intimidation, manipulation, or if the person is never pleased with what you do and always criticizes, that kind of thing. And it can be actually, it's a bit like brainwashing in a sense, in that it like wears away at your sense of yourself, your sense of self-esteem, your self-confidence, your trust in your own perceptions. It takes away so much of who you are as a person that you become kind of solely dependent on the abuser for your sense of self. And this is a dangerous place to be when you're unaware or unable to hold on to yourself as a person. So whether it's done by constant, berating, belittling, intimidation, that kind of thing, or whether it's somebody saying, oh, okay, it's like I'm teaching you something or I'm trying to guide you, things like this, the results are actually similar. You eventually lose all your sense of self and your personal value. And if any of you are watching that know at least enough that you're starting to research emotional abuse, and you're feeling like you can't trust yourself, that you have no self-confidence, that you're afraid to go out and get a new job, you're afraid to move out on your own, you're afraid to not be able to look after your kids, you're afraid to make new friends, maybe they don't like you, you're afraid to reach out at all. These are the long-term effects of emotional abuse. And I would say, please look into joining my Facebook group. Please reach out, PM me, Ailsa Kepi, or look on my website, reach out to me, and let's talk, because these long-term effects can affect you for the rest of your life unless you really have a way of transforming this lack of self-confidence, and really, what are your goals to get out of this? So what I would say is that someone often ends up blaming themselves and, clinging to your abuser, that kind of thing. So while these people that emotionally abuse don't always intend to destroy those people around them, they actually do. They want to control you. They don't want to destroy you necessarily, although some of them do, but they want the control. So, what better way to control someone than to make you doubt your own perceptions, and then they can come in and tell you what you should or shouldn't think, how you should or shouldn't feel. And, so you have such low self-esteem that you're reliant on them. And that's how we get trapped in these abusive relationships often for a long time. And you know what? The biggest fear often for women that are in these types of relationships or being emotionally abused is that we're afraid of being on our own. We're afraid of being abandoned. We're afraid that we'll never be able to cope on our own. We won't be able to survive. We won't make any friends. We won't be able to get a job. And it's like being a little kid in a scary world and there's nowhere to turn. So, people are worried about that. So, I would say that this was my experience too, and that it's a terrifying world when you look at, like, how do I get out of this? How do I actually learn to trust myself? How can I start this process? If you want to watch my free webinar on this process itself, the 5 steps to overcoming these long-term effects of emotional abuse, check that out at www.ailsakeppie.com. It's AILSAKEPPIE.com, and it'll go directly to a registration. You can watch the webinars free. You can watch that. It'll give you really great information on how this process works. But today, let's look at how we end up getting abused, and are we being emotionally abused? And then we'll get to looking at who might be doing this abuse and where it might have started. Quite often people end up in a really abusive relationship and they don't actually realize until they start looking at it that this abuse started many years ago, many relationships ago. Was their teachers, were their parents, siblings, other people that were abusing you from, usually a very young age, so that you became so used to it, it was your normal. And when it's your normal, you tend to attract what you're used to. You tend to be comfortable with what you're used to, even if it's not your ideal situation. It feels familiar, and familiarity feels comfortable, and comfortable feels right. And that is not necessarily the best thing for us if what has been our usual, our normal, has been abusive in the past. So let's look at that a little bit. Some of the things you may not think of as abusive, and some of them you may. Things like domination, if somebody's trying to dominate you all the time. Verbal assaults, obviously, if they're shouting, screaming at you, telling you you suck, you're stupid, you're lazy. I could go on in many more profane language, but you get the idea. Someone's putting you down. If someone has abusive expectations, and this is, things like you come home from work, so let's say you and your partner both work. You come home from work, you're really tired, they're really tired, and it's expected that you then go straight away and cook dinner, clean up the kitchen, put the kids to bed, clean the house, and they have to sit and relax, and watch Netflix because they've had a tiring day. These are abusive expectations of you, given that if you're both working, it's not really fair. And this is where society has kind of supported the idea that, typically the husband would be able to come home and relax. And now that women have gotten more freedom to go out and work, we still haven't quite caught up with this idea that we also deserve to have help in the house or with the kids, or how does that get ironed out? And while it may not be overtly abusive, the expectations that you're expected to, put out twice, do 2 full-time jobs maybe, and someone else is just expected to do the one job, and that's abusive expectations. There's emotional blackmail. This is, when people try to guilt trip you into doing something, oh, you never want to do what I choose, where are you going to go on Sunday? Well, now you can't really go too many places with this pandemic on, but let's say you were going for a drive and, you wanted to drive past your favorite place, and your partner's like, well, you never go where I want to go. We always have to go where you want to go. And of course, it's usually not true, but that's the kind of blackmail they do, is like, you don't think of me, you're just always selfish. And, they kind of implant that blackmail. I know, this is where we can start expanding our idea of emotional abuse as well to include things like this is where parents often have emotionally abused a child. So when you were young, you may have had similar things. You may have had a parent that always had to dominate you, that always had to one up you, that always, you could never shine at anything. They were always better. You may have had a parent that emotionally blackmailed you, that said, oh, you never, you don't appreciate what I do, like mothers particularly. This is where often our mother was sometimes our first abuser, or father more obviously maybe physical or intimidation, but the mother quite often emotionally blackmailing, that kind of thing, could be something like, you never appreciate what I do for you. I slave away in the kitchen and you come home from school and then you fuss at me and you do this and that. And, they may be setting up that kind of, emotional blackmail kind of pattern that you are responsible for your mother's feelings, let's say, or your father's feelings, and that those types of patterns are set up very young. And although we don't often think of it as abuse, it sets up a pattern which can lead to worse and worse opportunities of abusers to manipulate, to emotionally blackmail us later on. And it doesn't leave us growing up with good self-esteem. Not to say that we have to be narcissistic in ourselves, like not take anyone else into account, but we need to be aware that, we also don't need to take on our parent. If our mother is upset because nobody liked the dinner, it's not our responsibility to make sure she's not upset anymore. That's something that there's a boundary crossing there. And this is something I go into quite in depth in my program. The Body Leads the Way is actually a program I've created for women and to work through these steps of healing from emotional abuse and boundary setting, coming from this place of inner self-esteem that we have to rebuild, knowing who we are. Setting these boundaries becomes possible, and this is a big part of the program, along with many other parts that come into the big picture, because emotional abuse is such a core wounding type of abuse. We actually have to, we can't just give band-aids to emotional abuse. We have to actually, get into the nitty-gritty of who you are as a person, what you want. Can you even have any needs? And how do you know who you are? How do you create boundaries? How do you respond to other people? What is your attachment style? What are your ideas of the ideal relationship? Are they fantasy or reality? Like, so many pieces come into the healing of this. Anyway, getting back to what we're talking about today, another thing that if you're being emotionally abused would be unpredictable responses. This would be the type of person, quite often addict, an alcoholic, these types of people, if they have mental illness. Not always, but sometimes they'll respond very unpredictably. So sometimes they're in a great mood, sometimes they're really angry, and you never know which it's going to be, which makes that feeling of walking on eggshells, which a lot of people describe, which is really that emotional abuse kind of thing. Character assassination, they put down your gifts and qualities, they put you down, put down the character that you are. Gaslighting is becoming a term that is more known now, means kind of making you think you're crazy, like telling you, no, that's not the reality, here's the reality. And they tell you a different reality than what you sensed in your own being. And because they keep plugging away at it, it becomes, you kind of start doubting yourself. This gaslighting term was from a book. I can't remember the name of the story, but it was a short story back in the 40s or 50s, I think, where a husband actually told his wife she was crazy, put her in a room, kept telling her she was acting crazy, and and in the end she went crazy. So this is that kind of gaslighting. Constant chaos. Here's one that you may not have thought of. How many of you go to work and you have a boss or a coworker that just creates chaos everywhere, or says, oh my God, we need to do this all quickly and this is not happening and oh, the markets are all crashing, we have to suddenly do this. And there's always this chaotic kind of frenzied energy. This is actually emotional abuse. If someone is creating put like actually creating chaos just for the sake of keeping you off balance and keeping you in an anxious state. And sexual harassment, obviously, most people are aware of how that works into the emotional abuse, but this can be a really big part of it as well. So those are some of the things. I could definitely go more into each one of those, but those are a few ideas to kind of realize that emotional abuse is actually quite prevalent in a lot of our relationships. And especially if you're actually listening to this video and you've been attracted to listen to something about emotional abuse, I would imagine that you've had some either really subtle or really pronounced version of emotional abuse, either from your religious society, your cultural society, the people in your life, your parents, your siblings, your coworkers, your partners, your kids. There is so many, all of, friends, all of these people could be emotionally abusing you, some or all of them, in different ways. And it can lead to, even just a little bit of abuse from everywhere could still have the same effect of really making you doubt yourself. So obviously, the big one that everyone thinks of is your love relationship, your intimate partner, if you have one. Or in the past, you've had an ex that was emotionally abusive, possibly physically and sexually as well. Things that here's a couple questions you might want to ask yourself. Do you feel like a child, or did you feel like a child in the relationship? You had to ask permission, apologize for your behavior. Did you feel powerless or less than your lover or mate? Were you always trying to pump them up, and did you feel like your opinion didn't matter? That kind of thing. Let's see, what else might you want to look at? Does your mate use humor to put you down or degrade you? This is actually one I hear from women a lot when I talk to them, is like, they'll be like, well, we were out, at this party, and my partner just like kept telling derogatory jokes about me, or just like saying how ridiculous like this or that was that I did, putting me down in front of his friends. This is actually a way of emotional abusing you, and it makes you feel like crap. So, this is something to ask yourself. Do they do that? Do they put you down? Do they make fun of you? Do they use humor like, oh, women are, whatever, da da da, fill in the blanks? Do they do this as part of their abuse style? Does he usually get his way in deciding when and where the two of you will go? I've heard this one too. The first time you go on a date or something, the first few times, you love the fact that, I'm just going to use he, it's not always a man that abuses you, but we'll just use that he decides where you go. He's like, I've set up this date, we're going to go here, we're going to go there, and then we're going to do this. And he's like, he takes charge, and you just feel swept off your feet and taken out on this date. It can be really beautiful when someone takes charge and you feel taken care of. But you want to watch if this is a pattern that always keeps happening. And then maybe when you say, could we do like go for a hike instead of going to dinner? And then you get the silent treatment, or you get the pouting, or you get that you don't like what I offer. I take you out on these amazing dates, and now you just want to go for a walk, and you don't even appreciate what I do for you. Dun, 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 dun. So you want to ask yourself, do you ever get to have input in what you do together? It's lovely to be swept off your feet and taken on a romantic date where, he's made all the arrangements. However, it should be a reciprocal thing. Pretty quickly, you should, also be able to take him on a date, or you should, you might want to have some input, like say, yeah, I really loved that, but I would prefer to go to, an Italian restaurant rather than Chinese, or something like that. So you want to ask yourself some of these questions. Emotionally abusive bosses can be really prevalent. I've had a couple of people that's been their most prevalent experience of emotional abuses from a boss or a supervisor. And this can really wear you down as well, depending on how stuck you feel in the job. If you're a single mom, or, you're not sure that you'd be able to get another job, or you're afraid to try, or you live in a small community and you're afraid that if you leave this job, you'll be kind of blacklisted. All of these reasons can keep you, in a situation where you're being emotionally abused constantly at work. And this can also have derogatory effects. Coworkers as well can have these types of effects. Emotionally abusive friends. When you think about manipulation, emotional manipulation, and domination, things like that, you want to really sit down and look at your friends. Make a list of all your friends and have a think about your relationship with them. And is it really set up in a healthy way, or is it always they call you when they need to talk, or when they have drama in their lives, or they create chaos, or they drag you into their drama, and your role is just to listen and give them feedback and prop them up again? If that's your friendship, I would seriously be looking at questioning that, if that's really what you want from your friendship. So, we could kind of go on, but you get the picture that, parents, siblings, coworkers, bosses, partners, kids, anybody in your life, the religion you're in. I've heard of people, unfortunately, nothing against religion per se, but if you are being, or if your partner is being supported by, let's say, a priest or a pastor or a church or a dogma that says it's okay to treat your wife like this, or it's okay to do this, and they're making that behavior, that emotionally abusive behavior, okay because you're within this religious structure, I would, that can be much more difficult to deal with for you as a single person, but there is support. I had some of that experience in my past life, and I'm happy to talk about that with you. Again, it's an open invitation to anybody that listens to this video or is in my group or comes across me. I have a 1-hour free breakthrough call. You can book time with me. I'll sit down, we'll talk on the phone, we'll get clear about what your situation is, how you got there, what are the patterns that you notice in your life, what are the patterns of emotional abuse, where did they come from, what are your goals if you want to start overcoming this experience in your life. What are your goals and inspirations? What is something that will give you the impetus? What do you have hope for in your life? And we'll look at that. And then we'll look at, what would be the best step forward, whether that's some resource I can offer you or something else that I can lead you towards somewhere else. I'm happy to spend that time. You can book time with me on www.ailsakeppie.com/apply, APPLY, all small letters. So www.ailsakeppie.com/apply. You go straight to my calendar, book an hour to talk to me. We'll get on the phone, commit to the phone call. We'll get on the phone. We'll talk through your particular situation, and we will, come to some kind of plan for a way forward, whether you're ready for a baby step or whether you're ready to really commit and invest in yourself to actually overcoming these effects. We can look at that whole range of resources that are out there and where you can go. So thank you so much for listening. And again, if you're in my free Facebook group, Women Healing from Emotional Abuse with Power, Passion, and Pleasure, I do these talks every week, and I'm happy to have topics suggested in the group. If you would like me to talk about a certain thing, please do put it in the group, and I'll do my best to make a talk around what you would like to know. All right, everyone else, have a wonderful day.